rolling.
Even a happy life cannot be without a measure of darkness. And the word happy would lose its meaning if it were not balanced by sadness. It is far better to take things as they come along with patience and equanimity. And that is Carl Jung. And tonight we're going to talk about darkness, and especially as it relates to light and shadows. And maybe Bob could address this better, and maybe I'll start it, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, Bob, and you say what we need to say. But I want to preface this by saying everything we're talking about has absolutely nothing to do with like clinical depression or any serious mental, psychological, physiological condition that needs treatment and medication. We're talking about spiritual darkness. We're talking about even if it's psychological or psycho spiritual darkness. But I just want to say, or you say it better, Bob. What do we need to? What should we say to preface?
Well,
What am I trying to say, Bob?
There are probably people that are going to listen to this that come from all different kinds of places in their life and are in all different places on the continuum, whether they live a joyful life or they've got challenges or they're struggling with depression or anxiety. And, we're here, we're four different voices, and certainly, there are folks, myself included, who have needed and benefited from therapy, and there's a time and a place for that. And we're not that.
Right.
I think we can still be a support. You go to a 12-step meeting, nobody there is proposing to be an expert. I don't think any of us are proposing to be experts.
Right.
But we're voices that, hopefully resonate. And, here we resonate some with each other and just kind of open some things up and have our own different perspectives. And, respectfully being mindful of the topic that we're talking about. If, folks are really struggling, seek help.
Yes.
We're a voice. We can be a voice to listen to, but, seek help.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So when we think about darkness, we think about as we approach this subject, I feel like, from my perspective, I am a mostly upbeat, mostly happy, joyful, optimistic, idealistic person. My default setting is towards optimism, towards joy. And that being said, I have greatly benefited from my bouts, my struggles, my experiences of what I would like to refer to as my dark nights of the soul. We're going to try to cover a lot of different things. And one of the things we're going to cover are dark nights of the soul. And I want to, get into that and define it somewhat, talk about it somewhat, and our experiences of that. But I also want us to delve into the shadow side of who we are, the darkness that is a part of all of us. Even someone like me, who I, readily admit is, happy and optimistic and pretty joyful and finds a lot of fun in life and again, have that default setting that the glass is not just, half full, but it's full delicious drink. And I have a dark side. And I feel like we live in a world that would benefit greatly if people would embrace their dark side, appreciate, explore, and find the beauty in the play of light and shadow, of light and dark. When it comes to Dark Nights of the Soul, as far as we know, this was term experience was coined by Saint John of the Cross, 16th century mystic and poet, and his work, Dark Night of the Soul, begins with songs of the soul. Oh, on a dark night, inflamed by love, longing, oh, exquisite risk, undetected I slipped away. My house at last grown still, secure in the darkness. I climbed the secret ladder in disguise. Oh, exquisite risk, concealed by the darkness. My house at last grown still. The sweet night a secret. Nobody saw me. I did not see a thing. No other light, no other guide than the one burning in my heart. And that's how the poem begins. And this is very much someone who could not stay still, could not go to bed, could not, that had to, something drove him out into the darkness. This desire, this unquenchable thirst, or a thirst that's only quenched in a spiritual sense. And there's a great benefit from experiencing dark nights of the soul. And there's a lot of different kinds of dark nights of the soul. And in his poetic longings and seekings, they may be passionate and really capture spiritual desire, but we might experience a dark night of soul that is far bleaker, that is far more fraught and filled with despair, perhaps meaninglessness. There are those that say there's 4 stages to a dark night of the soul. I think I don't see it that way exactly, but I think these things are a part of the experience. One is discontentment. Another is desolation, disenchantment. And this leads us to reintegration and wholeness or maturity or evolution in a way. Darkness comes to transform us, to cause us to question. Bob and I actually spoke about this earlier this week, that becoming disenchanted or especially disillusioned is the death of our illusions. Is can we have rebirth without death? Can we have light without darkness? Can we experience the depths of what it means to be human without both the light and the shadows? I feel like when it comes to the darkness within us, our shadow, when it comes to our experiences of darkness, my experience has been the very worst thing we can do is resist them, fight them, ignore them. The best thing we can do is embrace them, is welcome them. I had an experience like that this week. And late one night, I believe it was Sunday night, and then leading into Monday morning, I had a descending of darkness, and it brought with it many dark gifts that I wouldn't have had otherwise. I could have tried to distract myself. I could have put on music or a book, or I've gotten busy with stuff. But I tried to sit with it, to welcome it, to let it do its work within me. And I'm sure I missed a lot, but I did benefit from what I was able to get out of it without resisting.
I think a challenge for a lot of us has been challenging for me a number of different times in my life is whether we call it a dark night or experiencing depression or being overwhelmed with life, or becoming dysregulated. Um, when we're in that place, I was just listening to you talk about it, and you entered it. You notice this occurring. You sense this energy or this movement, and you went into it regulated, meaning we've all got kind of our window of tolerance, right?
Mm.
And your window, Michael, is generally usually open. And there's one thing going into the dark when your window's here. And walk into it. And what the quote you read, he walked into it. He wasn't, pulled into it. A lot of folks have been pulled into it. And then of course are scrambling, and then it's like you're in quicksand. So I think different ways of looking at this is, hey, am I in a place where my window of tolerance is open and I can walk into this and I can endure the wave? But if I walk into it, I'm right here. It's most likely just going to be destructive, right? And so this is like, when I'm working with folks, or again, some of my own experiences, there are times where we need to open our window before we can do anything else. Trying to go somewhere, trying to journey, open up, explore, when your window is completely closed. And this is why we have we have folks that find different ways to have that window open, including medication. I've had clients where it's been clear, you know what, I'll tell I want you to go talk to your doctor, because the level of anxiety that you're experiencing, this repeated trauma response that comes from somewhere, and it's not your fault,
Right.
but you need help to open that window, so then you can process through it. I was talking with a client of mine today, 78-year-old man, really interesting, sweet, unique guy, incredible amount of anxiety. And he really does not like to take, and has avoided medication and medicine for most of his life, but he was having so much anxiety and so much difficulty sleeping, that he was finally willing, kind of with some of my encouragement, to go talk to a doctor. And the doctor gave him some medication, and they've explored some different things. And right now he's getting better sleep. He's gone from 2 hours, 3 hours to maybe a good 5 or 6 hours. So he's on the mend. And today he was like, "Oh, I don't want to need this medication." I said, "Yeah, of course." I said, "But, first let's get you stable, right? And then let's get you grounded. And then let's begin titrating." So when I think about the dark night of the soul, and I think somebody who's having a very large emotional upheaval in their life, they're they're having a hard time managing their emotions, I don't believe that's a time to go in. I mean, sometimes you're there and you're just trying to get stabilized, but I don't see that as being a time where there can necessarily be a lot of benefits from being in the dark.
So what you're describing is related to choice.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have a choice. Sometimes we feel
Right.
like we're in a place where we can take those steps and we say, I'm going to enter this. And then there's other times where it's there and we may say, now's not the time for me to delve or dive deep or walk into this. But also, obviously, we're not going to ignore it. And part of the reason I wanted to give our disclaimer, preface things, was sometimes there's, we're not ready for this. And so it requires therapy and counseling, medication, some stabilization, something like you're saying, before we venture in, if we do. That leads me to something I wanted to say real quickly and then hear from all of you again. There are times where we experience darkness or dark nights of the soul because something happened. We can say, I just lost someone. It could be, through death, divorce, a fight, end of a friendship or something, a business relationship. I just lost my job. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what's next. Or, I'm in midlife. I'm in crises. I just got a diagnosis. And I'm about to deal with an illness. Those are things that, we can probably say, I'm in this darkness or dark situation, and it's because of this thing. There's other times, like my experience this past week, there was no, now I think we have to, there was no preceding something that I said, oh, it's that. But I do think we have to be careful that when we do have these experiences, we're not too quick to look around and assign it to something and say, I'm feeling this way because of that, because that may not be it at all. The last thing I want to say right now before I turn it over to you guys is a dark night of the soul, a dark experience, an experience of the darkness can be and probably is in some way, and there's a spectrum, so it could be in a big way or a small way, a crisis that we're having, right? I have subscribed to something I heard Scott Peck say 30 years ago when I went to a seminar of his. And, he's considered, I think, the father sort of the self-help revolution or movement in many ways. He wrote the book, The Road Less Traveled, and many other books after that, but that was his most well-known one. He said that the best approach, as he saw it, to crises was try to have, relatively small ones, but have them on an ongoing basis. If you avoid crises, if you resist them, then sometimes I think it can lead to these big monumental, and I feel like our default settings, our human nature is we're trying to avoid discomfort and pain and darkness and try to expand, to enrich, to prolong happiness and light and those kind of states. When if we would embrace daily, weekly, ongoing crises of the soul, of the mind, of the heart, I feel like I feel like, first of all, I think that prepares us for the bigger times, the larger crises. But I think it also limits the impact, potentially, of the larger crises.
So when I was thinking about this, when we're talking about Dark Night of the Soul, I was kind of thinking, like, I feel like I've had four of them, four different things that happened over the last 4 years that have been turning points and what I would consider the start of one at varying levels. And I was thinking, it started very deep. The next one was in a decent spot, but I felt like there was more. And the next one was there, and I'll get more into that. But when you said four levels of it as a thing, I mean it kind of makes sense since the way mine unfolded, and I'm sure it's different for everybody. But in 2020, I was at the verge of suicide. I was living in a life I call the pit of despair. My life insurance had lapsed, so I couldn't commit suicide. I had a wife and kids. So transition, I'd known I was different my whole life. So transition was kind of a last ditch effort, but that got me out of the depression. Like as soon as I decided to go forward with it, I stopped antidepressants. I stopped the other medications I was on, and I had hope for the first time. And that was a stage, but it wasn't spiritual at all. It was really just survival. But I began to thrive. And after coming out, my wife and I separated, and I was alone. Luckily, I had a mom and a brother that really supported me. But I came back home to my hometown here in Panama City in June of that year, and for 2 months, all I did was really hang out with my mom or my brother. And I started having an existential crisis in August, like, oh, I'll never have friends, I'll never have a relationship. And it was kind of another trigger that pushed me forward. And I had a mystical experience the night I had that breakdown and met two of my best friends that we're still friends today. This was in 2022. And the next week, they invited me to a party to introduce me to some more people. And I'm still friends with that couple. Like, Memory and her husband are amazing. David and Stanley are the ones I met that night. Like, I met these people that are just amazing people. And it started me on another progression where I was kind of proving myself. And we were having amazing times. David and Stanley had this amazing house for entertainment. We were having parties with hundreds of people, sometimes twice a month. Like we had this. All of a sudden, I went from no social life to this incredible social life. And you know, at that point, after a year or so of that, I kind of got triggered again to where it was fun, but had this disease, this discomfort that knowing that there was something more out there and I wanted to do good instead of just having fun. And it kind of started my spiritual journey right after that. So, the parties died down a little bit, but we still did it and I still was doing that stuff. But, I kind of started tiptoeing into spirituality and stuff like that. And after about a year of that and doing a lot of reading and intellectual work on spirituality, I kind of hit a thing, and this has been 2 years ago that I kind of hit this point where I was like, "There's more. I need to do more," but I didn't know what it was. But it was terrifying, and it's come back over and over, and I didn't know what it was. And in the last few weeks, I feel like that fourth stage has kicked in, where I finally figured out what it is. My life was amazing. Like I really have a great life right now, but there was that push for more. Like I was like, and I could finally see the last little things I was holding on to that were holding me back. And started therapy this week actually to kind of deal with that. So I can see these four stages that are gradually moving me to a place where I was at zero and I moved up to maybe 40% and then 60% and then heck maybe 90% this last little bit. I mean, everything's been going my way, but there was this one little thing wasting time was something that I was running into. I was spending too much time on social media and spending too much time playing video games and doing things that I were hearkening back to when I was in my worst state. So I was like, there's got to be something more to look into and let go of to finally hopefully get to a clearer state where I'm at that higher level. So I can see the four stages. I kind of look at it as four different dark nights, but I can see actually a progression through one that started with the depression and everything, and now it's just actually moving towards clearing my field or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, I think they're all valid. The only thing I would say is even with something that I'm as convinced of as the stages of death and dying that Kubler-Ross, they're not linear. So it's not like we really pass from one stage to the other and it's this amount of time. Mm-hmm. And then it doesn't mean that we're necessarily going to go through all of them or, in any certain way. And we definitely can do them at different times and regress. And I just, I don't trust anything that's like, okay, this is going to be your experience. This is how it works. But I do think there's a lot of truth in these things, which is, why I shared them. There's other people that say there's 7 steps in the a dark night of the soul. It's just, I think it's all good and worth talking about. And I definitely appreciate everything you shared and how your experience has been. I mean, in one sense, I think all of our experiences are a continuum and they definitely relate to each other.
And honestly, before you said that, I looked at it as 4 different experiences, but there was always a need for more. Knowing that there was more and figuring out how to get past where I was to the next I'm going to call it stage, but the next, level of that, getting past that discomfort and that feeling of lostness that was there,
Jasmine, you have something to say? Go ahead.
Okay. You sure? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking when you speak of the dark night of the soul, you speak of darkness. I was thinking of the experience of whether it's being someplace familiar or unfamiliar, if the lights were suddenly to be cut off and you're plunged into the darkness. And so there's a couple of ways that you can react to that. You can sort of feel your way through the dark of what you remember of the room or that space and try to get to a space where there's light, or try to get to some place that feels safe, because it can be jarring and uncomfortable to be suddenly somewhat the experience almost of blindness, right? Because if you go from light to dark, you feel like you can't see. But another reaction would be to give yourself time to adjust and to remain calm, and at some point your eyes will adjust, your pupils dilate, right? And then you're able to see the space, and it may not be the same, it's not lit the same as when the lights are on, but then you can safely navigate. And I think for me, the times I would think that I feel like I've experienced a dark night or a dark time or period of the soul, initially I would bump around in the dark, bruise my knee, turn over the lamp, metaphorically speaking. And then I feel like more recently I've learned to pause and to see what awareness there comes, from that space, from that darkness. And, if you think of being in that space in the light, when the lights are on, it has one appearance, but in the darkness, it's the same objects. It's the same room, the same space. The shadows are different. There's different objects or different furniture that might stand out to you. And I think it can be the same. There can be some clarity in that darkness, but I think it's important what Bob pointed out about, having that window, having that, also being in a place personally where you're able to see and able to experience that without it just being frightening and overwhelming and not helpful.
What a great metaphor. And it's so true. So true. I wanted to mention that I mentioned my default settings of positivity and whatnot. Given that and sort of how my family of origin sort of operates, earlier in life, I would attempt to lessen the experiences of darkness, decrease for myself and others. I would attempt to insulate certain loved ones from, especially my children, from some of these things that are so beneficial. And eventually, I feel like I grew to the place where I realized how foolish that was, both again for me and for others, to not rush to distract, to not rush to end a dark night of the soul, or to get out of the darkness, or to try to find some kind of light to turn on, but to embrace it, to sit with it, to be there. And I alluded to this before, but I want to say it again. Resistance just magnifies, just it means we're not getting what we could out of it, but it also is usually that which prolongs it.
I wonder too how much darkness is necessary. If you think in terms of like our bodies and our circadian rhythms, our natural rhythms, our bodies we need certain periods of daylight and natural vitamin D, and then to rest. And I think we all at this point know how essential sleep is. But for us to naturally come to a state of sleep, there needs to be less light. And, think of the things that we're coached to do. If you're having trouble sleeping, dark room, an hour before bedtime without screen time, minimize the artificial light, that sort of thing. So I wonder, emotionally and in our soul and the parts and our non-physical parts, how much that time is needed as well. There's in that, like, using sleep as an example, which most of us do when it's dark. There's so many things in our natural body that besides the rest, sleep is essential to me because I know, well, it's essential for everyone, but one of the effects that it has that's significant for my body is without those periods of deep sleep, then you don't regulate insulin. And so that throws off other hormones, our bodies are such complex machines. And I wonder how much as humans, we also need that experience of darkness, whether it's as a reset or to bring that clarity or just for balance. And I don't feel like I have an answer to that, but just as we're talking, that's something that I wonder is how much of that, like you said, if we don't resist it, if we're in a place to embrace it and to learn from it and to grow from it, how much, how fruitful it can be.
Yes.
I slept with my head under the covers until I was about 12 years old. I was afraid of the dark. I would not want to walk down the hallway in the dark. I'd want to have a light on. I had an incredible imagination. And as we were talking, I was thinking, well, what meaning do we apply to dark? For 6, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old me, dark was scary.
Yes. Yeah.
It was maybe even terror. It was imagination of lots of things, where maybe that's not what dark means to somebody else. Maybe dark is something to embrace. Maybe it's something that has to do with rest, somewhere where it's the beginning of life that's emptiness or openness, And one word that was coming to my mind as you were talking, Michael, and this is, one of the big IFS words is can I be curious? And if I can be curious about something, right, then I can start being open to it, right? If I can be curious about what's dark, right, and sometimes these paradoxical, if I can bring light into dark,
Yeah.
but the light is actually from within me and how I'm understanding it and looking at it, then the meaning that we give to something, the underlying belief, what is the underlying belief that's leading us to do and feel and experience things the way we do? And that belief is so crucial. I have experienced anxiety and panic attacks off and on for a lot of my adult life. And if I am experiencing a panic attack and I am in a state of fear, I'm toast. But if I start feeling the physiological sensations of a panic attack, and I have I'm grounded, or I can just breathe with it, and I can trust that it's going to pass, and then I end up afterwards actually having an increased sense of security, right? And that's where I think talking about going through the darkness can actually nurture and create strength, security.
Right.
Your window's got to be a little bit open, and you need
Yeah.
open support. But
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
we talk about dark being something like terrible, like seeming awful, depression or anxiety or something that's soul crippling. But like, Kabbalistically, it's the light is source. So darkness is just disconnection from the light. And I looked on Wikipedia, the description there is confusion, helplessness, stagnation of the will, and a sense of withdrawal of God's presence. And the one that really resonated there for me was stagnation of the will. And what I'm going through lately, I realized that there was something to deal with because I was procrastinating a lot. And I started looking at all the things I do to numb discomfort, whether it's watching videos or playing a game or eating or all the different escape mechanisms I do. And just today, like I finally was able to, like I logged every minute of what I did today because I'm trying to stop doing those things unconsciously and be conscious about how I live. And I realized I knew it was affecting some things, but it's affecting everything. And I went through this. I don't have anxiety. I've never really have, but the best way I could describe what it feels like is like I used to be really nervous speaking in front of a crowd, and I might still be. I've never done a big crowd, but that seizing up you get of your body, that whole nervousness that you get, like I went through that what 4 times today, I guess. Once I was reading and I just was going to sit there for 15 minutes, be quiet, not think of anything, and my heart rate increased, my breathing increased, like I was like felt super tight. And after a while, like I got it under control, and at the end I finally was relaxed and stuff. But I went through that, and then when I got relaxed, I realized that my environment's kind of a reflection of what I am inside. And I'm like, it looks like when I was in that relaxed state, I was like, it looks awful in here. So I went to the kitchen to clean. And after 5 minutes, I had that same reaction. I was like, this is hard. I don't know how I'm going to get this done. I don't know where I'm going to put all this stuff because, I'm in the process of moving too. So I don't know where I'm going to put all this stuff. So I got that same visceral reaction that was the exact same as sitting still. I pushed through it and, eventually made a lot of progress and did something. But then I did reading. I was sitting down to read after dinner tonight. And after like 10 or 15 minutes, that same exact reaction came up where I was feeling that same way. And I realized that, and it worked today. After like 10 minutes of work, I hit a hard problem and did the same thing. It was the exact same feeling all 4 times, 5 times, whatever that was. And I realized how pervasive this procrastination was. And that's my disconnection from my higher will. I feel like that is there that my body's trying to keep me from that. And anytime it gets a little bit challenging, I go reach for something to dull the pain and to get away from it and to stop focusing on it. And it had become a problem in my life more than I realized that I really, there was a lot of stuff I wasn't doing that I could have been because of this. Anytime there was a little bit of a challenge, I went the easy route. So I'm finding that, this dark night of the soul is just from, procrastination, which is, not something I would have ever thought of as darkness before, but it was invading every little bit of my life. And it was a disconnection from the light, which I feel like your higher self is that connection to the light.
So I want to ask a question. I'd like for all of you to answer it, and I'll give you my answer. Is darkness merely an absence of light? I don't believe so. You could argue that it is, and maybe some of you will, but I don't think it is just an absence of light any more than the color white is an absence of the other colors. I don't think that's the case. I think there's something valuable. I think there's something beautiful in darkness. And again, I with Jung's quote and different people, like, have said you can't have light without darkness. So I personally don't think, but I would like to know what you think. Is darkness just the absence of light?
Yes, I believe it is. And there's a lot of stuff in duality that's that way. There is no such thing as hate, there's just lack of love. There's no such thing as cold, it's lack of heat. And I mean, that's one that's easy to show because you can have an infinite amount of heat. Look at the sun, it's trillions of degrees, but there's an absolute zero. You can only take so much heat out of something before you can't go any colder. And I feel like it's that way in a lot of the duality relationships we have, that there is only in the supernal realm the light, and the creation in Kabbalah, Ein and Ein Sof, and Ein Soft Or is that light of God that created everything. So that's why I kind of look at a duality relationships as there's only one truth. Everything else is a distortion of that truth. So darkness to me is the distortion of the light, and why I feel like there isn't an actual true darkness. There is only lack of light.
Cool. Very interesting.
There we go. I think we're all talking about what meaning do we ascribe to it.
Yeah.
How do we define dark? And my response would kind of say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is like where the Zen master would like smack you in the face because you're trying to concretely get somewhere and make something. It's the experience. It's the relationship. What is my relationship to this? And my relationship to it is based on the meaning that I apply to it based on what's inside of me and where I come from. And so Father Thomas Keating is he was one of the key people that brought back centering prayer to the Common Era, and this was a form of meditation done, for many hundreds or thousands of years by the Christian ascetics and others, and it got lost along the way, and it was reintroduced, and I'm going to be misquoting some things, but more or less around 50 or 60 years ago. And Keating was one of the people, and he started what was called the centering prayer movement. And I got introduced to this 30 some years ago, and it's a form of prayer meditation that I practiced for a year or two. And Keating has written a few different books. In his first book, it's called Open Mind, Open Heart. And in that, he describes the psychospiritual process, and he links them. And darkness, in the going into the dark, is about healing and going back into the parts of us that have been hurt and being with them, and then bringing light to them and healing them. Okay. And so spiritual, psychological, I think they're very, I don't know if there's that much of a difference. But going into darkness is I need some healing. And I don't know what that darkness is for each individual or for each person. And there are some, broad, I can't think of the word, but there are some the myths, the stories that are things that all people experience. We have some Michael, you might help me with the words for that. I can't think of what it is. But we all, as a people, we have some universal experiences, and then we have our uniqueness within them. And this universal experience of encountering dark is uh, an opportunity to heal something. And am I a place where I can go to and relate to that part of me, or that history within me, or the legacies and past generations that have been given to me, or if you believe in past lives that have been given to me, can I go to them to heal them? And to go to them, I've got to go to them. And that's dark. That's darkness. Am I safe going into darkness? And darkness isn't darkness.
If you believe you're safe going into darkness, are you safe? If you don't believe you're safe going into darkness, are you not safe?
What you believe is what matters the most, especially if we're talking about internal work. What you believe matters. Belief is at the foundation. And in using internal family systems, as you get to know these parts of you, as you get connected and learning about the different parts of you, different facets of you, you start connecting to the beliefs that are underneath. This part of me carries a certain belief that comes from somewhere. Okay. And really the belief is the burden, or the belief can be the darkness. Is that what I'm carrying? And how can I be freed from this belief? By putting light on it, by sitting with it and allowing it to pass. Sorry if I'm rambling a little bit.
Not at all. A dark night of the soul, coming to you in just a minute, Jasmine, is a period of profound disconnection, doubt, despair. Can be mistaken for depression, but it's rooted in spiritual growth. And the darkness that we're talking about, and what you've been describing, is one of our best paths to emptiness, to fallowness, to winter, to allowing things to experience a certain form of regression, perhaps death, toward a certain end, right? Towards rebirth, towards, winter is necessary, is absolutely necessary. And I believe that about darkness. Jasmine, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on?
Several, but because if you look at the textbook definition of darkness, it's the absence or diminishing of light. But I was thinking of the title of a documentary I watched once for work, and the title really just stood out to me because the title is Dark Side of the Full Moon. So again, that idea of it being part and parcel. It's because the idea of course, there's the bright side and the dark side. And I was thinking too, as we've been talking about the way that we define darkness, if you think of the imagery that whether it's movies or even cartoons, like how darkness is used to portray evil, to portray fear or terror or that kind of thing. But that's not necessarily the case, right? It's, that's what we're trained to think of it. But as you were reading to us again about describing the dark night of the soul, I was thinking about the word doubt, and which to me could be associated with questioning contemplating, considering, evaluating. And that period of doubt or similar emotions can lead to, to overcome that. To me, some of it is finding evidence for faith or for hope, right? And so to me, out of that, you can grow. Because if there's something you're doubting about yourself, if you're doubting about your situation, that period of reflection can give you new perspective, or can be a time of reminding yourself of strengths, of skills, of intestinal fortitude, so to speak. So I don't know if I have a solid, a firm answer whether darkness is the absence of light or could be defined elsewise. I think it would be yes to both,
Yin and yang.
Yes.
Light and dark. Whatever attributes we ascribe to darkness, I think they're all essential. I don't think these are things we need to overcome. I don't think we need to bring light to the darkness to try to transform it in some way. I believe it is absolutely essential. Given all the caveats of everything we've said prior to this, if you're dealing with something else, depression or something, that's not what I'm talking about. But spiritual darkness are our dark sides, our shadow side. Bob mentioned inner work just a few minutes ago, and it made me think of when Carl Jung was asked if we're going to make it. As a species, he was asked, are we going to make it? And his answer was, if enough of us will do inner work. And to me, what's in there is light and darkness, is light and shadow. And what is a shadow? There's a light source, and there's an object. And there's a shadow. Is that object bad or evil or negative? Is the shadow that it casts? One of the things that a lot of people say happens in dark nights of the soul is a form of ego death. I have used an expression most of my adult life. When I experience something like this, I call this being brought low. And I feel like my experience is mostly high. And there are times where I need to be brought low. I had an experience 2 nights ago where someone said something to me that was hurtful and was wanted to engage in conflict with me that I just, I have no interest in conflict. But it took my high experience. I mean, I was having a joyful, wonderful, light-filled experience. One of my favorites in life. And it changed it. And it, in a way, brought me low. And I took a different approach to what I was doing. I feel like there are times where I am living high, living out of spirit or ego. And the best thing that can happen is that I am brought low. Thomas More says that spirit wants to soar, but soul wants to deepen, to go down. I want to experience both. I think both are absolutely essential and necessary. And I know for me as a human being, as a person, I need both. And if the fallowness comes, if the darkness comes, if the being brought low comes and it makes me question everything, I think that's a good thing. And I think when spring happens, the new growth is what needs to be growing. If I embrace this process, if I allowed for the fallowness, so I love the darkness and I am grateful for it. And I appreciate the interplay between light and darkness.
And I feel like the darkness is not. Go ahead.
No, you go, John.
I feel like the darkness is necessary. I mean, that contrast shows you the light, but it also shows you where you're not aligned with your higher self. Like the stuff you're talking about being brought low, I can see that many times where I get on this cloud high, but it's an ego thing where I'm trying to force things and I'm trying to do something. So I mean, there's a concept of non-doership where you don't work so hard to accomplish things. You let go and just let yourself be guided by your higher self. And I really think those brought low situations are when you're trying to do things that are not aligned with that higher purpose. Those are corrections to push you back and to bring you back in a check and make you look and go, maybe I'm not in the right spot. Like I said, my recent thing started and on Thanksgiving with my children being here. They were studying for finals, didn't want to go out, but they were sitting there playing video games. So I started playing video games, and that kind of started my thing. And that's what made me realize that I've got some unresolved issues here because I'm doing the same escape mechanism that I was doing when I was in my darkest spot. So it pushed me to, I feel like, move forward on my path because I was living high and not necessarily aligning with where I was supposed to be. So now I'm having to go back and look and figure out where that alignment comes in and how do I get my body and my mind in alignment with my soul.
I read Care of the Soul, I don't know, 21, 22, 23, and I don't think I'd read anything before that kind of talked about the darkness or the shadow. And when I was reading that book, it felt so kind of open and accepting. It's like I was able to feel more comfortable with these parts of me because the book was presenting this as these are healthy, this is normal, there's nothing the matter, this isn't something you have to resist. And the other thing I was thinking when I went through my head a couple times was, Paul McCartney said, when I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me speaking words of wisdom, let it be. So can I just let it be?
Yeah.
And, can I, and there you were talking about resistance, can I let it be? And can I even let my resistance be and just allow myself to resist? Or do I have to resist resisting?
If you let yourself resist, if you let that be, there's nothing else to do.
There's a time and a place. I wish I knew when. If I only knew when and which one to do, then it would all be good.
I agree with Jung that by suppressing our shadow side, we very often project it onto others. That the conflict that we're in is because we're not accepting and embracing. And to me, feel free to disagree. I'm telling you what I believe and where I am and what my experiences are. And the study and what's resonated with me over the years I feel like there's a spectrum or stages or levels. Again, feel free to disagree, but I feel like for me, one level is acceptance, another level, the next level for me is embracing, is appreciating, is saying, hello, darkness, my old friend. This is you are a part of me. You are a part of this world. You're a part of everything. I embrace you. I love you. I need you.
I guess there's transmuting that to where, like, I don't really see darkness in myself anymore because everything that's happened to me has been something to help me out. So I have things that have lessons I'm learning still, but I don't see it as necessarily darkness anymore. I see it as just a part of my being now. I think that lowest level of emotions on the emotional scale is that shame and guilt. And if you have shame and guilt, I think that's what defines darkness. But if you get past the shame and guilt, then it's just an experience, just like any other one. Maybe, and I don't know. I have to really think about it, but I can't think of anything I would consider dark in my life anymore. By the traditional all evil villain darkness.
Yeah.
Well, and
The
I mean,
procrastination for me is a very dark place for me right now because it's infiltrated every part of my life. But I'm not going to see that as an evil, dark thing that like I think of when I really think of darkness like that.
It's clarity. If I have clarity, doesn't matter.
and that what you're describing, I think both of you is an integration of light and dark. It is the embracing, it is the accepting, and a shadow is if you're um, let's say have an aggressive personality in general. With the shadow of that, you might be also have this more gentle, kind nature. Maybe most people don't even see it. With yin and yang, we talk about positive and negative, right? Polarities. We talk about light and darkness and the interplay. We're both and. It's not either or. And our maleness, femaleness is on a spectrum. Our positive and negative, our even our extrovertness and introvertness. There's I don't think there's these categories we can stick ourselves in. I mean, I think we try to, but I feel like it comes up short. And I feel like so much of resisting darkness and resisting the shadow leads to the kind of issues and maladies that we find ourselves in and the world finds itself in.
What did Yoda say? Where there is, what did he tell Luke? Something about where there's anger, there is this fear, and where there's fear, there is suffering. There's a few. I wish I could remember. Yeah.
And then, but once you remember it, you got to say it backwards, right? You got to.
Shit.
Yeah.
Shit.
Anger there is.
Anger leads to fear.
There you go.
Fear leads to suffering. But there was another one in there that I'm missing. I can't remember what it was.
But one of the things I've been working on lately is the Course in Miracles, and early on in the course, like in day 8 or 9, one of the things it says is that you are not feeling the way you are because the way you think you're feeling. And I mean, I think that goes back to what you're saying with Yoda, is that anger isn't about anger. Usually it's about fear or powerlessness or shame or guilt or some other lower emotion that's being hidden by anger, because anger gives you back control of yourself and makes you
Yes.
feel like you have some power. So I always go to that vibrational scale of emotions when I feel something and kind of look below it and figure out where that's coming from. And sometimes even extreme good feelings are you know not healthy either. It could be masking something else too. So sometimes bad feelings are easy to go, yeah, there's a problem here, but sometimes good feelings are a little bit too, your ego's getting too big, you're something like that. So I mean, any strong emotion I think can be a mask or an indication of some other thing that could be an issue that you need to look at.
Many, most of my most profound experiences, spiritual, mystical, romantic, psychological, intellectual, insight, happen at night for me, and often very late at night. I love the darkness. And when Jasmine was talking about the importance of sleep, and I, again, as a young person, I did not, I resented sleep. I wanted to sleep as little as possible. And I had friends and loved ones, and they just loved sleep so much, and they couldn't get enough. And I was like, oh my God, you're sleeping your life away. I just could not. But
Yeah.
I understand and the importance of sleep, and I appreciate it, and I approach it as give it the importance that it has. And one of the ways I do that is with blackout curtains, so that if I'm up till 4 and I want to sleep till 10, light's not streaming in at 7 or 8. It's still night. It's still dark in my room until I wake up and kind of merge. I think, like I said before, night is not just when the light disappears. I think there's a special energy tonight. I think there's something different. I think, Bob, what you were describing as a 10-year-old, we've all had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And in the same way, if you watch the scariest movie you have ever seen in your life, if you had seen the original rough cut of that without the music and without the sound effects, it's not the same experience. You probably wouldn't find it scary at all. Watching a scary movie in the middle of the day with daylight outside in the broad daylight, it's a different experience. Doesn't that speak to there is something different about night and day, light and dark? But I think they're both critically important and necessary. When we are forced into a dark night, I think of the darkest of nights. I think of the Holocaust. I think of what Viktor Frankl said. Someone who's in the concentration camps and studying people's reactions and what's going on to this darkest of darknesses. He said, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And there may very well be times where the darkness is not our choice. It's not what we want, but we cannot reach the light switch. No matter what we try to do, no matter what, we cannot, we can't even find lost light. We can't find any. We still have a response. That response is our choice. We get to choose. Acceptance, embracing, just being, let it be, sitting with, or like we did maybe as little kids, fighting sleep, trying so hard to keep ourselves awake, or fighting a shot, some inoculation we needed, fighting, struggling futilely against what is best for us.
A lot of it too is we can't choose what comes our way. We can only choose how we react to it.
Right.
And you mentioned the Holocaust being the darkest night ever. And some of the most inspiring stories are some of these stories from, that you'll read about from Nazis and Jews, where there were Jews in there that were still happy and positive and loving and were just magnanimous people in the midst of something where they were going to die. So I think, that kind of is just shows that you can get to a point where death doesn't fear. You don't fear. You're eternal. You can actually act with kindness and love in anything, and that's kind of what we kind of need to shoot for, is to not control how it comes at us, but control how we deal with it and always act in a loving way to ourselves and to others. Because a lot of times the stuff that comes at us makes us doubt and question and talk bad about ourselves. So,
Right.
I mean, yes, we get mad at a person, learning to calm that down and love them, but we get mad at ourselves, and learn down to calm down and love us is another, way. Always act in love no matter what the situation, and the outcome is already better than what you could expect.
Am I meant to cling to life and fight against death? Is life good and death evil? Is the light good and I'm supposed to cling to the light and fight the darkness and resist the darkness? Is life and death part of the same eternal dance? Is light and dark the same way? Is it?
Death's just a transition from one stage to another. Your soul's eternal. There is no thing. So I mean, the life that we have here on this planet is a short blink in eternity, and there's, you know, trillions of years outside of that your soul's going to encounter. So once you connect with your soul and realize that you are eternal, the physical doesn't matter as much. But I mean, I think a lot of people worry about what happens after I die, and is there a heaven and hell? Is there a thing? But there's not. There's just a wave falling back into the ocean. And when you get to that calmness, death is just a transition from one stage to another. Do I know what's going to happen? No, but I'm not actually concerned with it either. I think the most thing, and this is what we talked about when I said there's only one truth in the world. There was the book called The Power of the Subconscious Mind. They said something to the effect that the natural state of the universe is health and joy and abundance. So if you're experiencing anything outside of this natural state, that's something that you've caused on yourself, that you've got to learn to release to get back to that natural state. So I believe that, out there, the universe is pure love, is the best thing that we could just, say it here, or peace, maybe. Like, it's goodness in the universe, and we're in something that's distorting that goodness.
I feel like we would all be better served if we question, get curious about our relationship to light and dark. And I feel like it's been my experience, so that's what I'm speaking from, that there are many, many, many gifts in the darkness that perhaps our way of thinking about the darkness is keeping us from.
Well said.
As far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being.
Mm.
That is also Carl Jung.
I need to bow out, Michael.
Thank y'all so much for thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you so
night, Bob.
much.
See you soon.
Hey,
Sorry, I didn't think we were at 8:30 yet. My bad. Thank y'all so much. Sure appreciate this. I think this was a
Thank
great
you.
discussion. And excuse me, if you will let me know when to get the files. What I'm going to do is have someone do the first cut, which is just going to be taking out pauses and the extra space and all that kind of stuff. And then we'll do the real edit of making it flow and and so we can all be listening and have input and notes on that. So cool.
I need to get my Adobe subscription updated. Go ahead and stop this.